On February 10, 1992, a fire ripped through the Rowe family home in Boise, ending the lives of Robin Lee Rowe's husband and 2 children, while she, the only one absent that night, walked away unharmed. Robin Lee Rowe was born in 1957. Her life was unstable from the start. Friends and family later described her as distant. She often struggled in her relationships and had ongoing financial troubles as an adult. By the time she reached her 30s, she was a mother raising a family of her own. On the surface, it looked like she was building a regular life in Idaho. But underneath, her past was filled with tragedy and suspicion. Years before the events that later placed her in prison, Robin had already lived through situations that raised serious questions. In 1977, one of her infants passed away in what was believed to be sudden infant death syndrome. At that time, authorities did not connect it to anything unusual. But when her life was later reviewed as a whole, that loss no longer looked so simple. In 1980, it happened again. Another one of her children passed in a house fire in California. Investigators ruled it as an accident. Yet, with time, doubts began to grow. 2 young lives lost under questionable circumstances, both times under Robin's care, seemed like more than chance. The repeated connection between her and both fire and loss would later raise deeper suspicion. By 1992, Robin was married to Randy Rowe and living in Boise, Idaho. They lived together with her 2 children, 10-year-old Joshua and 8-year-old Tabitha. To neighbors, they seemed like an ordinary family. But behind closed doors, their marriage was strained. They had ongoing money problems, and Robin appeared to be hiding secrets. On the morning of February 10, 1992, another fire broke out. This time, it was inside the Rowe family home. Flames spread quickly. By the time it was over, Randy, Joshua, and Tabitha had lost their lives. Robin survived. She told investigators that she had not been at home that night. Instead, she said she was staying with a friend. This raised questions. Why had she chosen that exact night to stay away? And why had she recently taken out large life insurance policies on her husband and children, just months before the fire? When investigators studied the remains of the house, they learned the fire had been started on purpose. An accelerant had been used. It was clear this was no accident. Detectives then looked deeper into Robin's past. 2 of her children had already passed in suspicious ways years earlier. Now, her husband and 2 surviving children were gone in another fire. The motive became clearer: money. Robin stood to gain large insurance payouts, which could solve her financial struggles. She was taken into custody in March 1992. The community in Boise was shocked. How could a mother do something like this? How could a wife plan the destruction of her own family home? Her trial began in January 1993 at the Ada County Courthouse. Prosecutors built their case step by step. Fire experts explained how the blaze had been set intentionally. Insurance agents testified about the policies Robin had taken out. Witnesses also shared how she behaved after the fire. They described her as calm, detached, and at times, even cheerful. The defense painted a different picture. They said Robin was a woman who had faced many personal losses and that people were unfairly judging her because of her past. They argued she had no reason to harm the people closest to her. But the evidence stacked against her. One of the strongest points in the trial was the question of why she was not at home that night. If she was truly innocent, why was she away from her family at the exact time of the fire? Prosecutors said the answer was simple. She planned it. She stayed elsewhere to create an alibi, while the fire destroyed her home and family. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached their decision. Robin was found guilty on all counts. The sentencing phase came next. Prosecutors asked for the harshest punishment possible, saying the plan had been cold and motivated by financial gain. They pointed out that even her own children were victims of this plan. The defense asked for mercy, describing her as someone shaped by trauma. In February 1993, Judge Alan Schwartzman gave his ruling. He said the acts were carefully planned and carried out without remorse. He sentenced her to capital punishment, making Robin the first woman in Idaho to receive that sentence. Since then, Robin has lived in the Women's Correctional Facility in Pocatello. She has appealed her case several times, but all appeals have been denied. More than 30 years later, she is still there. As of 2025, she is 67 years old. Idaho has never carried out the sentence against a woman. Her case continues to be discussed, raising questions about family, money, and the choices that led her there. Next, a mother who lured a rival into a trap and buried the truth behind her mother's house. Amelia Lily Carr grew up as the second of 3 sisters. She was considered highly intelligent, with an IQ of around 125. When she was 15, she told authorities that her father mistreated her, but she later withdrew her statement. In February 2004, her father was convicted of trying to arrange harm against his family. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Her adult life was complicated. She had been married twice. One of those relationships ended with her filing a restraining order against her ex because of mistreatment at home. She was also placed on probation for her role in a scheme involving the theft of exotic birds. At the time of Heather Strong's disappearance, Amelia had 3 children from previous relationships. She was also 8 months pregnant with Joshua Fulgham's child. Amelia and Joshua had once been engaged in November 2008, but their relationship became tangled when Heather Strong, Joshua's wife, was also part of their lives. The situation was tense. Heather and Amelia did not get along, yet Amelia even babysat Heather's children at times. On February 15, 2009, Heather went missing after leaving her workplace. About 1 month later, on March 19th, her remains were discovered in a shallow grave behind the home of Amelia's mother. Investigators found that Heather had been taped to a computer chair and suffocated with a plastic bag. The question many asked was whether Amelia acted out of sudden anger or if this was planned. Evidence pointed toward planning. Prosecutors said Amelia tricked Heather into coming to a trailer by claiming there was money hidden inside. Once there, Heather was trapped. A recording later revealed Amelia speaking about the act with Joshua's sister. This was just one of 10 different statements Amelia made without having an attorney present. Joshua himself helped lure Heather to the trailer and took part in what happened. The prosecution argued that jealousy and betrayal were the driving motives. Amelia was pregnant with Joshua's child, yet he remained married to Heather. They said the plan was deliberate and carried out step by step. When the trial began, the jury found Amelia guilty of first-degree charges and also of abduction. By a close vote of 7-5, the jury recommended the most severe sentence. The judge agreed, stating that the act was cold, carefully planned, and extremely cruel. The court added that the abduction made the case even more severe. These points were considered more significant than her claims of a troubled past. Some people questioned whether Amelia's difficult childhood and her claims of mistreatment should have mattered more. However, the trial court decided that while her past was difficult, she was still able to function and had willingly chosen to participate in planning. Amelia appealed the decision. The Florida Supreme Court reviewed the case and upheld both the conviction and the sentence, saying the trial court had correctly weighed the evidence. In 2015, her conviction was affirmed again. But in 2017, Florida made changes in how such sentences were decided. Because of these legal updates and lengthy appeals, Amelia's sentence was reduced to life in prison without the possibility of release. She is currently housed at Lowell Correctional Institution Annex in Florida. The next woman seemed like an ordinary church-going cashier, but everywhere she went, those closest to her kept losing their lives. Blanche Taylor Moore grew up in Concord, North Carolina. Her father, Parker Davis, P.D. Keyser, worked in a mill and was also a Baptist preacher. At home, however, he was known for being harsh. One story from Blanche's childhood was that he reportedly forced her into adult work to settle his gambling debts. Her mother was Flonnie Keyser, born Honeycutt. In 1952, Blanche married James Napoleon Taylor. He was a Korean War veteran and worked as a furniture restorer. Together, they had 2 children. Their first child was born in 1953, and their second child in 1959. Blanche began working at Kroger in 1954. By 1959, she became the head cashier, which was the highest position women could hold there at that time. Her husband, James Taylor, passed away on October 2, 1973. At the time, it was believed he had suffered a heart issue. Many years later, after Blanche was taken into custody, his body was examined again. Tests showed extremely high levels of arsenic, about 60 times higher than normal. Around the same period, in 1970, James's mother, Isla Taylor, also passed away. Her body was later tested as well. Arsenic was found, but not in amounts high enough to be considered the direct cause. In the mid-1980s, Blanche started a relationship with Raymond Ray Carlton Reed Sr. He was the store manager at Kroger. On New Year's Day in 1986, Ray ate some potato soup prepared by Blanche. Soon after, he became very sick with vomiting and nausea. He missed weeks of work. His condition continued to worsen, and by April, he had to be hospitalized. Despite medical care, his health continued to decline, and he passed away on October 7, 1986. Doctors believed the cause was Guillain-Barré syndrome. But later, further testing revealed large amounts of arsenic in his system, ranging from 30 to 70 times the normal level. A urine test during his hospital stay had already shown extremely high arsenic, but nothing was done about it at the time. In 1989, Blanche married Reverend Dwight Moore. Just days after their honeymoon, he became violently ill after eating a chicken sandwich she had given him. Doctors later discovered arsenic in his system at levels about 20 times higher than what would normally be survivable. Dwight lived through it, but was left with lasting health problems. Why did Blanche do this? Investigators pointed to financial motives. Ray Reid had made Blanche the executor of his estate. She received 1/3 of his assets along with insurance money. While he was in the hospital, she also tried to have his will changed. She arranged for a lawyer to visit him, and after his passing, she helped manage his money. On July 18, 1989, Blanche was taken into custody. She faced charges related to James Taylor, Ray Reid, and Dwight Moore. However, after her conviction in Ray Reid's case, the other charges were dropped. Her trial began on October 21, 1990, in Winston-Salem. Blanche denied ever bringing food to Ray while he was in the hospital, but 53 witnesses contradicted her. Nurses and visitors testified that she brought him milkshakes, soups, puddings, and jello. During this time, Ray was heard crying out in pain, saying, "Please help me or I'm going to die." There was also a strange twist. Investigators discovered a letter that looked like a confession from a homeless man. In the letter, he claimed he had poisoned the men because he loved Blanche. Handwriting experts, however, proved that Blanche had written the letter herself. On November 14, 1990, the jury found Blanche guilty of first-degree charges in Ray Reid's case. 3 days later, the jury recommended the highest sentence allowed by law. On January 18, 1991, the judge confirmed the sentence. Since then, Blanche has been housed at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. Now in her 90s, Blanche still remains there. She has faced health struggles, including cancer, and has gone through treatments like chemotherapy and radiation. She spends her time writing poetry and composing music. The next woman seemed like just another East Texas mom, until a body was found burned by the roadside. If you find stories like this important, consider subscribing. Kimberly Diane Cargill was born in 1966 in Texas. From the outside, she looked like an ordinary woman living in East Texas. She was raising her family in the small town of White House. Kimberly was the mother of 4 sons and worked to support them. To many, she appeared like someone trying to hold her life together. But inside her home, things were very different. Her life was filled with constant problems, unstable relationships, and a pattern of aggression. Neighbors and people who knew her described her as unpredictable. They said she could snap in anger without any warning. Her home life was tense, and her relationship with her children was often damaged by her short temper and reckless choices. What started as bursts of anger eventually grew into something much more serious. Even before her most infamous case, Kimberly was already known to the justice system. Over the years, she was arrested several times for mistreating her children and for physical harm. Reports showed that she had hit her children with objects like belts and extension cords. At one point, Child Protective Services stepped in after repeated complaints. This raised an important question. How did she keep getting her children back despite so many reports? The answer lies in flaws within the system. Even though she was investigated many times, she managed to avoid permanently losing custody. This left her children in a home filled with fear and instability. Her anger was not only directed at her children. Kimberly also had a history of conflicts with her romantic partners. Some people described her as manipulative, saying she would lash out whenever things didn't go her way. Police records showed that she had been arrested multiple times for different kinds of aggressive behavior. Courts had seen her name before, but no one imagined just how far she would go one day. At the center of her most infamous case was Cherry Walker, a 39-year-old woman with mild intellectual challenges. Cherry was gentle, trusting, and loved helping people. She often babysat Kimberly's son and was well liked in her community for her kind nature. But to Kimberly, Cherry became a problem. Cherry had been called to testify in a custody hearing involving Kimberly. The case focused on Kimberly's history of child mistreatment, and Cherry knew details that could be used against her. Kimberly feared that Cherry's testimony could destroy her chances of keeping her children. Instead of facing the hearing or taking responsibility for her actions, Kimberly decided to silence Cherry. On June 18, 2010, Kimberly picked Cherry up under the excuse of spending time together. But her real plan was very different. That night, Cherry lost her life at Kimberly's hands. Afterwards, she was placed in the trunk of her car. She then drove to a rural spot and set her body on fire, trying to erase any evidence. When investigators found Cherry, her remains were badly burned. The scene was extremely difficult to examine. This act shocked everyone, even experienced investigators. Kimberly had betrayed a woman who trusted her and relied on her, Cherry had been vulnerable, and Kimberly chose to target her in a calculated way. Investigators soon connected the case back to Kimberly. Witnesses confirmed that she was with Cherry on the day she disappeared. Her long history of aggressive behavior only made her more suspicious. When questioned, Kimberly denied everything. But the evidence told another story. Her trial began in May 2012 at the Smith County Courthouse. Prosecutors explained clearly that Kimberly had ended Cherry's life to stop her from testifying in court. They revealed her history of aggressive behavior toward her children, her partners, and those around her. People who testified described her as dangerous and unstable. The defense argued that there was not enough proof to say Kimberly was responsible. They tried to raise doubts about the timeline and about witness statements, but the jury was not convinced. One of the most powerful moments came when prosecutors explained how Cherry, a woman with limited understanding of danger, had fully trusted Kimberly. That trust was betrayed in the worst way possible. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury gave their decision. Kimberly Diane Cargill was found guilty of capital charges. On May 30, 2012, she was sentenced to the highest punishment in Texas. The court ruled that her actions were deliberate and that she acted with the clear goal of preventing a witness from speaking in court. Taking away a witness is considered an offense not just against the individual, but also against the justice system itself. Prosecutors stressed her long history of harmful behavior and claimed she would remain a danger to society. The jury agreed, and she was sent to Texas's Roe. Since then, Kimberly has been held at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. She has filed several appeals, trying to fight her conviction and sentence. But as of 2025, all have failed. Her case is often discussed as an example of how untreated trauma in someone's life can spiral until it reaches its worst outcome. Today, at 57 years old, Kimberly sits inside a Texas prison. She is one of the few women on Roe, her name forever tied to the betrayal of Cherry Walker. The next woman claimed to fight cartels, yet targeted an innocent family instead. Shauna Ford grew up with a restless and unsettled personality. In 2007, while running for a city council seat in Everett, Washington, she described herself as having done many different jobs. She had worked as a grunge rock band promoter, youth counselor, aircraft factory worker, and cosmetologist. Her early years were difficult. She faced juvenile cases connected to stealing, breaking into places, and adult work. Her personal life was unstable. She was married 4 times. In one instance, in 1989, a male friend took out a restraining order. He claimed she had physically harmed him and threatened him while holding a sharp tool. In 2008, she told law enforcement that a cartel had targeted her and shot her. But the case was dropped when her own brother suggested she had made the story up. In 2007, Ford joined the Minutemen Civil Defense Corps, a citizen group that watched the border. Later, she was expelled. She then co-founded her own group called Minutemen American Defense, or MAD. She claimed it had several thousand private members. But one former member admitted there were only about 14 at the time of her arrest. Ford viewed herself as the border operations manager for the larger Minuteman project. She even had plans to buy a 40-acre ranch in southern Arizona to use as a base for these activities. She was driven by both ideology and desperation. She wanted money to support her border group. She labeled Raul Jr. Flores as someone tied to dealing substances. Her plan was to stage a fake law enforcement raid at his home. She recruited 2 accomplices, Jason Bush and Albert Gaxiola. They met in Colorado to plan out the break-in. In May 2009, they drove past Flores' home to look it over. She also met with local figures who were tied to substances to get help with planning. Later that night, Shauna Ford dressed in camouflage clothing. Jason Bush darkened his face. Gaxiola joined them. Together they returned to the Flores home. Ford banged on the door and demanded to be let in. She threatened to fire her weapon if they were refused. Raul Flores opened the door and let them in. Inside, Ford ordered Raul to sit next to his wife, Gina. Their 9-year-old daughter, Brisenia, was asleep nearby. The situation escalated. Raul lost his life. Brisenia was also shot even as she begged for mercy. Gina was hit 3 times but survived by pretending she was no longer alive. Imagine Gina's pain in that moment. She saw her husband and young daughter taken away. She whispered, "Don't shoot me," while injured on the floor, forced to remain still in fear. Ford was later charged with 8 counts. These included 2 counts of first-degree ending of life, 1 count of attempted first-degree ending of life, as well as burglary, armed theft, aggravated battery, and aggravated robbery. In February 2011, she was found guilty on all counts. The court emphasized that even if she had not fired the shots herself, she was the one who organized everything. She recruited the others and planned how it would all happen. The deputy county attorney said, "She's the one who planned the events. She's the one who recruited people to do this." In the sentencing phase, the jurors chose the ultimate penalty. One juror, Angela Thomas, described the image that stayed with her. Brisenia had bright red fingernails. She wore a white t-shirt and turquoise pajama bottoms. Her face was partially destroyed. Angela said it was something no parent should ever have to see. The Pima County Superior Court in Arizona gave Ford the maximum sentence, making her one of only 3 women on the state's row for that punishment. In 2014, the Arizona Supreme Court reviewed her case. Some of the robbery charges were combined to run at the same time, but the sentence of ending her life and the other convictions remained in place. The next victim was terminally ill, yet his wife chose a far quicker end. Wendy Louise Andriano was born in 1971. She spent her early years in Florida before moving to Arizona. On the surface, her life looked normal. She was married, had children, and seemed to have the kind of family life many people admire. But inside her home, things were not as perfect as they looked. Her marriage to her husband, Joe Andriano, was breaking apart. Joe had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. He was going through treatments and trying to keep his health stable so he could spend time with his family. For most families, this would be a time to come together. But for Wendy, it turned into something very different. She began to see a future without him, one where she believed she could find freedom and financial stability. On October 8, 2000, Wendy put her plan into action. That evening, Joe was weak from both his illness and the medications he had been taking. Wendy invited a friend over to help keep an eye on him, saying she was worried about his condition. But once the friend left, Joe was alone with her. Later that night, Wendy called 911. On the call, she sounded like a caring wife who was helping her sick husband. But according to prosecutors, that was not the full truth. They argued that she had given him poison while pretending to care for him. Emergency responders arrived and found Joe on the floor. He was not responsive. His condition did not match what Wendy had been telling them. An examination later showed that Joe had not only been given sodium azide, a dangerous chemical often used in pesticides, but he had also suffered severe physical injuries. His head showed signs of being hit with force, and he had multiple wounds. This raised an unsettling question. If he had already been poisoned, why had she also injured him so brutally? The prosecution said the answer was simple. She wanted to make certain he would not survive. Why would a wife do this to her husband who was already very sick? Prosecutors told the jury that Wendy was unfaithful. She had been seeing another man. With Joe's illness moving slowly, she did not want to wait. She wanted her freedom, her new relationship, and the money from Joe's life insurance. During her trial, this became the central question. If Joe's illness was already terminal, why not wait? Why take such a risk? Prosecutors argued that Wendy was frustrated with how slowly his condition was progressing. She wanted her future to begin right away. The trial started in 2004, 4 years after Joe's passing. The prosecution presented forensic evidence, 911 recordings, and witness testimony. They pointed out how she had tried to get sodium azide, which showed that the act had been planned in advance. The defense painted a very different picture. They claimed that Wendy was trapped in a troubled marriage and acted in self-defense after Joe became aggressive. But the evidence of poison, along with the physical injuries and the multiple wounds, strongly worked against her version of events. Jurors listened to the recordings of her 911 call. They noticed how she seemed more focused on how things looked than on actually helping Joe. This further damaged her story. After weeks of testimony, the jury made their decision. Wendy Louise Andriano was found guilty of first-degree charges. In December 2004, the court sentenced her to the most serious penalty under Arizona law. The jury agreed with the prosecution that the act had been especially cruel and was motivated by both financial gain and her desire for freedom. She was moved to Perryville Prison in Arizona, where she has remained since. As of the year 2025, Wendy is still there, waiting for her sentence to be carried out. Now we switch to a scheme that used charm and planning to get cash and escape. Meet a woman whose plans reached from jail programs to the open sea. Skylar Sophia DeLeon was born in 1979 as John Julius Jacobson Jr. She had a brief moment in the spotlight as a child actor, appearing as an uncredited extra in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That small brush with fame later became a strange contrast to the life she eventually led. By her mid-20s, Skylar had joined the U.S. Marine Corps, but she left after only 15 days. This resulted in a less than honorable discharge. Behind this, her childhood was full of pain and mistreatment. Her defense attorney explained that her father, John Julius Jacobson Sr., often hurt her both physically and emotionally. She was beaten over very small issues, like having messy hair or a pimple. She was also forced into situations no child should face, including being made to sleep unclothed next to him. She was treated as if she had no freedom in her own home. Some later wondered if these experiences shaped the choices she made as an adult. In December 2003, Skylar turned her attention to a man named John Jarvie. He was 45 years old and had met her through a jail work release program. Jarvie withdrew 2 checks, each worth $25,000, and contacted Skylar shortly after. Skylar spent about $18,000 and placed another $21,000 into a joint account. The next day, Skylar and her cousin, Michael Lewis Jr., drove with Jarvie to Mexico. Jarvie was later found along a highway near Ensenada with a deep wound to his neck. His body had been left on the roadside, and his car was abandoned nearby. Only a year later, Skylar planned something even larger with her then-wife, Jennifer Henderson, who was pregnant at the time. They wanted to take a couple's yacht for themselves. Thomas and Jackie Hawks had just retired. They dreamed of a quiet life in Arizona and decided to sell their 55-foot yacht named Well Deserved. To Skylar, this was the perfect opportunity. Jennifer first gained the couple's trust. She even brought their baby along when meeting the Hawks, which made the couple feel safe. On November 15, 2004, Skylar set her plan into motion. She brought along 2 men, Alonzo Maychain and John Fitzgerald Kennedy. During a test cruise, the group overpowered Thomas and Jackie. The couple was forced to sign papers transferring ownership of the yacht. They were then restrained, gagged, and tied to an anchor. Finally, they were pushed into the ocean, left unable to escape. Their bodies were never found. After this, Skylar and her partners tried to erase all traces. They cleaned the yacht with bleach. They destroyed the Hawks' belongings. They forged and backdated documents. They even tried to access the Hawks' bank account and transfer funds to Mexico. Their goal was to make it look like Thomas and Jackie had left willingly. Money was the clear reason behind these acts. Skylar was also said to be planning gender transition surgery around this time. She needed large amounts of money to move forward with her plans. By early 2005, Skylar was caught while trying to escape to Mexico. Soon after, Alonzo Maychain, Myron Gardner Sr., John Kennedy, and Jennifer Henderson were also arrested. In August 2005, charges were filed in John Jarvie's case. The Hawks case was treated as even more serious, since it involved 2 lives and financial motives. Special charges were added against Skylar. The trial began in September 2008. Skylar's lawyer admitted her role, but asked the jury not to give her the maximum sentence. He pointed to her childhood and mental health struggles. But on October 20th, 2008, the jury reached a decision. They found Skylar guilty of 3 counts of first-degree unlawful taking of life, with added special circumstances. On November 6, 2008, the jury recommended the highest penalty. On April 10, 2009, Judge Frank Fassel made it official. Skylar was placed on California's row for the most serious sentences. Her partners faced their own outcomes. John Kennedy also received the highest penalty. Jennifer Henderson received 2 life terms, without the chance of parole. Alonzo Maychain, who testified against the others, was given about 20 years and was released in 2021. While in prison, Skylar legally changed her name to Skylar Sophia DeLeon. She began hormone therapy in 2009. By April 2023, she underwent gender-affirming surgery. Reports said this procedure was covered under taxpayer-funded prison health care.